Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison. I am pleased to have today with me Jen Maxfield, who is a journalist, and she's also written a book expanding on the stories on 10 of the stories that she reported on. So welcome to the show, Jen.
And thank you so much for having me, and thanks for your interest in the project.
Thank you and thank you so much for being here, and it's a pleasure to have you. So why don't you briefly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers today?
Absolutely. So, hi, everybody. My name's Jen Maxfield, and I'm talking to you from New Jersey, where I grew up and where I've been reporting for the last 2 decades. I work for NBC in New York, and I'm a TV news reporter. I estimate I've interviewed more than 10,000 people over the last 22 years in the course of my work as a TV news reporter. And my first book just came out. It's called More After the Break, A Reporter Returns to 10 Unforgettable News Stories. And the book goes back to 10 of the people who I've interviewed over the years to see what happened after our live truck pulled away from the scene.
So tell me, what inspired you to become a journalist?
I always loved writing and I loved reading, and I'm an extrovert. I really enjoy meeting new people and going to new places and learning from people. And so when I was in college at Columbia, I had an internship at CNN at the United Nations. And the correspondent at that time, Gary Tuckman, who's still on CNN, was amazing. And he let me come with him to news conferences and help him write his stories for CNN radio. And I got bitten by the journalism bug and just felt that that was my path to go out and listen to people and interview them and report their stories on the news.
Okay, so what was the inspiration behind the book?
So, as a local news reporter here in the New York City area, the way it works is we get assigned a story in the morning and we go out and we work on it all day, and the story airs that evening. And sometimes, depending on breaking news, we might report on one or two or even three stories a day because we might keep getting moved around. But it's very rare for us to go back to the same story over and over again because we cover 20 million people here and the news cycle is nonstop. I wanted to slow down a bit and to be able to go back to 10 of the stories that I could never forget, people I was still thinking about even after their names faded from the headlines, and reconnect with them and ask them, what was it like being in the center of all this and being on the news? Look, the people I interviewed, they're not celebrities. They didn't ask to be on TV. They didn't want to be in the spotlight. They were put there because of circumstances beyond their control.
Right. And I've noticed that, like, in not to give away any spoilers, but in chapter 2 of your book, you cover Katrina, and then you do a segment about Superstorm Sandy, which had some personal. The way, if I read it correct, it had a personal touch on your life as well.
Right. Well, that's part of being a local news reporter and living in the community where you cover the news. Because, especially with something like a weather event that impacts all of us, if there's a storm coming to New Jersey and I'm reporting on that storm, like in the case of Superstorm Sandy, a historically bad storm for our part of the country, it's not just that I'm reporting on it, I also live here. And so I was worried about leaving my house and my husband and my children. And I talk about setting them up in the basement where they could all sleep that night in case a tree fell on our house. So, yes, sometimes we really do have that confluence between the professional and the personal life when you live in the community that you cover on the news.
Okay, so I would love to talk to you more about the book and delve into it a lot deeper. But for the sake of time, what do you have any tips or takeaways that you want the listener or the viewer to walk away with today?
The biggest thing is to just show compassion for the people you're around. I was raised the oldest of 6 kids, and my parents always taught us the message to treat other people the way you want to be treated. And that is the way I've approached people on news scenes for the last 22 years. And it is uncomfortable sometimes for me to approach people on what might be the worst day of their life and they're going through some really, really tough things. But I always approach people with empathy and compassion. If they don't want to do the interview with me, that's their choice. But more often than not, they do. And I'm honored, and I feel it's a privilege to be able to tell other people's stories.
You're the first journalist that I've heard of that has done something like this. So, where can people find you online?
Sure, I have a website. It's jenmaxfield.com. And if you go to my website, that links to all my social media accounts. And you can find me on all the social media platforms, either as Jen Maxfield or Jen Maxfield News.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this because this was inspired. This was inspired from another podcast. Do you have a call to action for the listeners? It could be a challenge, it could be a resource they can go to, just a final call to action.
Well, the subtitle of my book is A Reporter Returns to 10 Unforgettable News Stories. And I hope that people who are watching this or listening to this take a moment and think back to your own unforgettable stories in your life. And I hope that the book provides people a lot of hope and inspiration and inspires people to go back to people in their past and to reconnect and form those bonds that I write about in the community that I've covered all of these years.
So, one more final question. Are you working on a new book, or do you have anything new that you'd like to share with us?
Well, this book just came out a couple days ago, so I'm really focused on this
Oh,
project.
wow.
I'm on a book tour right now, which is going across the country, and you can see the details on my events link on the jenmaxfield.com page. I'm just enjoying having conversations with the viewers and people I've interviewed in the past, and instead of speaking into the camera, being able to meet people in person at all of these book signings. And I haven't started writing another book. I'm still working at NBC in New York, and we'll see what happens in the future.
Oh, wow. So thank you so much for being on the show. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. We challenge you to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands, as Jen has done in her book. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys. And remember, your story matters. Have a blessed day, everyone.